All right, today we have Anton from the Chilean Pentagram joining us for an interview. So, as many of you may know, Pentagram from Chile is one of the most influential South American bands of all time, especially in the extreme metal underground. They get pigeonholed as death metal, but it spans multiple genres because it was created at a time when subgenre specific nomenclature wasn't really necessary. It was just extreme evil metal. So, in my opinion, it's somewhere between death thrash and black metal. So, welcome, Anton.
Thank you. Thank you, Yusuke. Thanks for having me.
Yep. So I think I'll start this interview by going all the way to the beginning when you guys were only 15, 16 years old. Um, or maybe even before that. How did you guys, meet up and then how did you learn to play instruments?
Um, well, I learned to play guitar when I was quite young. I learned to play acoustic guitar. Started learning when I was 9 or 10 years old or something like that. And I picked up the electric guitar when I was maybe 13 or 14. I begged my dad, please, please, please get me a guitar. And on one of his trips, he finally bought me one, and I started playing along to Black Sabbath and Judas Priest and stuff like that. And I met the other guys. Well, Juan Pablo Uribe is the other founding member, really, and we met by chance actually in the local record shop. There was this one record shop that used to carry the all the imports, all the cool stuff. Um, and he was in there browsing, and I think he held up like a Merciful Fate record or something like that. And I was standing right next to him. I didn't know him, but I told him, well, that's a cool album, and we started talking and stuff, and we became friends eventually. He didn't really play the guitar at that time, but we started to hang out together, and I started showing him some riffs and stuff. Later on, he actually went to proper guitar lessons, and he became a much better player than I am. But yeah, at that time it was all like, "Hey, look at this. This is how you play it," And I gave him the guitar and passed him the guitar, and he played after me and all that. And at first, what we said, yeah, yeah, let's start a band and whatever. But when you're that young, you don't really know what you're doing, I think. And so we just started playing some riffs and stuff, and making up like song titles and stuff like that. And but at some point, we became kind of serious about this. It must have been like 1985 or something like that. I was like 16 or something like
85, you
that.
mean? Yeah, you said you
Eight-
said 95, but it's
oh, I said
85.
95. No,
Yeah,
no, no,
yeah.
no. 85,
Yeah.
85. Yeah, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And we had trouble finding a drummer, because we wanted a drummer who could play like double kicks and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
back then, that was not really a thing. It was not every drummer could play it like now. And and just to give you an overall idea of what the scene was like in Chile, it was mostly cover bands. It was there were a lot of cover bands who used to play like school parties and stuff like that. And they used to play like, there weren't like tribute bands, but they played all covers. They played one from Anthrax, one from Metallica, one from Riot and Van Halen, whatever.
Hmm.
And there was this one particular drummer who stood out for us, who used to play in a band called Armageddon, Eduardo Topelberg, and he was really good. He really had the speed down, and the double kicks and everything. But he had started his own band, and they started doing original material. They were called Kronos with a CH, Kronos. But it was more like power metal, maybe. They played some fast stuff, but then they had some other stuff which was more like influenced maybe by Manowar and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, and we sort of tried to convince the guy, but he was older than us. Uh, and we tried to convince him to join the band. We already had the name Pentagram and whatever. No idea there was another Pentagram in the US, by the
Hmm.
way. Um, and yeah, we tried to convince him to get him into the idea, and he was like, I don't know, I don't know. And then he agreed to join, but as a guest member, because he wanted to stay in his band Kronos. Back then it was like musicians weren't really like allowed to have multiple bands like now. It was like, oh, this is my band and whatever. But he agreed to play with us, and we started rehearsing for what would be our very first show, which was on December 28th of 1985. So coming up 40 years now, you know. And we played. There were six bands on the bill. I remember it was Belial from Valparaiso. There was Crypt, Rust. Hang on, who
Massacre?
else? Massacre were headlining, and Nimrod was the other band, and Pentagram.
Hmm.
So that was the six bands on the bill, and it was very, very amateur, very, very precarious. It was we someone I don't remember if it was us or Massacre. We hired it was like a taxi driver's union hall or something like that. It was really not made for this kind of stuff.
Hmm.
There was like a makeshift stage, and I remember there was no monitors. You couldn't hear what was going on, and it was all very chaotic, but it was fun. And actually that evening I met some people who we would stay friends until now. It was like the first time, because Massacre, they had been playing for a while, but they were always playing these shows with these other bands who played covers, or the
Hmm.
older bands who played like heavy metal, hard rock, that kind of stuff. They were like the first extreme metal band in Chile. And musically they were okay, but they had balls. They were trying to do something different and extreme. So yeah, we kind of looked up to them a little bit, and yeah, that was our first time playing together. And then we for some reason we really wanted to get a drummer of our own, and we spent all of 86 looking for someone. And there was this guy who eventually ended up playing in Necrosis. We played one gig with him, but it was only like three songs or something like that. Also very chaotic and everything. Eventually, we convinced Eduardo to join like full time, like he would like a full member of the band. And that's when we started doing like the demos. 87 is when really things happened for us. We did like the two demos that people know until
Hmm.
now, and we started playing bigger shows, and everything got a little bit more serious and professional.
Yeah, so how many people attended that 85 gig?
I'm not sure. I mean, depending on who you ask, but it was probably 100 or 200 or something
Hmm.
like that. Not a lot more than that. Maybe less.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
It's interesting to me that from all those bands, I mean, I recognize all of them from just being in the underground, but the only one that actually stood the time in terms of, just long-lasting respect from all over the world is Pentagram. You know, like
Yeah,
Nimrod and Massacre, those names are known deep in the underground, especially for people like me that follow the South American stuff, but they don't do much for me when I listen to it. It's okay, but it it's a time and place thing. They were doing what they were capable of doing back then, but it didn't pass the test of time. I listened to Pentagram today, and it sounds just as refreshing today as it did the first time I heard it in the 90s. I'm a bit younger than you are, so I heard Pentagram in the 90s.
Mhm.
I'm 49 this year. I wish I had heard you guys earlier, but I think the first time I heard it was when I found the 7 inch. So
Yeah, yeah. I
it's
mean, yeah. I mean, those bands, Belial, they started out like as a black metal band, and then they became like a grindcore band, more like,
hmm
and they're okay. They have some pretty cool albums, but yeah, they didn't transcend, in terms of being known worldwide or whatever. Crypt was only like a one-time thing, I think, and Rust eventually became Warpath,
hmm
who in Chile were quite well known. I mean, they always played with us, or we played with them when we played the bigger shows in '87, and but it tended more to a more like technical
Yeah,
thrashy sort of
regular
thing,
thrash. Yeah, we
like
carry their stuff too. Yeah.
more like Megadeth or
Right.
stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nothing too special in my opinion. They were
Mhm.
cool, but nothing like something new like Pentagram. Because like I said in the intro, Pentagram doesn't exactly fit into one category so easily. It has an evil edge, so it's not just like regular thrash or death thrash or something. And the repetitive nature of the riffs kind of reminds me of something like Necrovore. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, so it's just
Yeah, I mean,
refreshing, even if I hear it for the hundreds, thousands time today. It still sounds refreshing.
cool. Thanks, man. Yeah, the thing is also, then the at the same time that we're talking, the whole Brazilian scene started to happen, the whole cogumelo
Right,
stuff, Holocausto and Chacal and Mutilator and Sepultura, of course, and but we never thought of ourselves as part of that,
right.
we always it's not like we were snobs or anything, but we wanted to do a little bit something a little bit more interesting, in terms of riffs and structures and I think up to today, I mean, you listen to the demos, and you're like the song structures were pretty weird, pretty odd. It
hmm
was not like the regular sort of verse chorus bridge solo whatever, it was like we did one part two times and then we completely changed to something, and the first part never came around again in the song and stuff like that,
hmm
which is weird, and maybe came from our appreciation of bands like Merciful Fate, because they were sort of out there in terms of songwriting, and we really liked that. Something unpredictable, that you couldn't really know what was going to happen next in the song,
Right.
I think that's most of the appeal, actually, because we're never. I mean, we thought of ourselves as more technical than all those Cogumelo bands, and we
Right.
were,
Yeah.
but we weren't atheist or something like that either. It was we were decent at our instruments, but we were not virtuosi or whatever. So. Yeah, well, I think the main thing I mean, the main, yeah, the main thing that defines the character of Pentagram is the riffs, which, as you said, it's like a very, very dark thrash metal. It's like a more evil Slayer, maybe, but
hmm
with some slower parts like Celtic Frost or something like that. So it's the riffs and the structures, that were completely off, like completely different from what anyone was doing.
85, 86 is pretty much the dawn of extreme metal. So, I mean, besides Venom, you know, I guess like Mantis Death was also doing stuff back then.
Yeah, yeah,
Obviously Bathory and Slayer, they all had albums before you guys, but
yeah.
what kind of stuff were you listening to? Um, I see the t-shirts you guys are wearing, but I just want to hear it firsthand. Like what were the influences that, led you to create this sound that's very unique?
I think, well, I think it was at the beginning we were really into Venom and Metallica, before we actually started the band, you know.
Hmm.
Metallica, Kill 'Em All, Venom, Welcome to Hell, Black Metal, At War with Satan, Ride the Lightning as well. Um, but then Slayer came along and changed everything pretty much for us. So that was like the main influence. But also, as I said, Merciful Fate, Possessed was very important as well
Yeah.
because they had that kind of off
Hmm.
vibe as well. You know, they did some really weird stuff with the drums. I don't know if it was the guy just couldn't play better than that, or it
Hmm.
was just weirdness coming out of them. But then as well, for me, Possessed were just so brutal and evil, and the vocals were just so desperate and yeah, just brutal that
Hmm.
that was like, wow, really an eye opener, you know.
Hmm.
Another band I have to mention is Dark Angel. We really
Right.
looked up to them, you know, especially Darkness Ascends, you know, when
Right.
that came out, we were like the drumming was like, wow, you know. And it's crazy how the playing really evolved in those years because if you compare like Show No Mercy to Hell Awaits and then to Rain in Blood, you know, the way Dave Lombardo's playing evolved was just crazy, you know, it's that from just a tuka 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 to like a Venom beat to doing like
Hmm.
all this stuff with the rolls and the fucking kick drums and everything. It was crazy. But then I forget to mention also, I would say Destruction, Sodom to a lesser degree, but Kreator was also a very big influence for us. You know, Pleasure to
Hmm.
Kill was like, wow, when that came out, it's like an explosion in your face, you know, and the riffs were just so aggressive. And yeah, I think people don't realize maybe, but there's a lot of Kreator in Pentagram as well.
I can hear that, especially in the vocal patterns, because unlike Slayer and Dark Angel and other American thrash and speed metal from that time period, it's not your vocal style is more European in nature. It's not this like rapid fire, almost like crossover thrash
Mhm.
vocals like Slayer and Dark Angel. That's very characteristic of California metal, you know. I'm glad that you went with the European vocal style because I prefer that. It's not, you don't go at the same pace as the music, is what I'm trying to say. I
Yeah,
feel like, yeah.
it's interesting that you say that because I never really thought about it. You know, when I was writing the lyrics, when I was like working on the vocal lines, I never really thought I'm gonna sound like this guy or I'm gonna sound like this other guy. It's just everything that I was listening to just came through me and into the stuff that I was doing. And then when we practiced we didn't have a vocal mic or whatever mostly so we were just playing the songs and I was just imagining the riffs and I mean the vocal patterns and stuff, you know. So when I first got into the studio that was January 87 when we recorded the first demo.
Hmm.
I didn't really know what I was going to do, you know, and I just started screaming at the top of my lungs, you know, and trying to make it sound as aggressive as possible. And everyone in the studio was like, "Fuck, what is this?" You know, especially especially the sound engineer. He didn't have a clue what was going. I mean, he wasn't into metal or anything, you know. He was just some guy who recorded whatever came along, you know, and he was like, "Fuck, what is this?" You know. So yeah, it was just all like inspiration, you know. We weren't thinking. I didn't think I want to sound like Millie or I want to sound like Tom Araya or this or that. I mean, if anything, Jeff Becerra would have been my main influence, you know.
Hmm.
But also, I don't. I like it because soon after we started, there was a lot of death metal happening. You named it Mantas, you know, and all
Hmm.
those other bands that came after them, and all of them were using these really gruff, like you know,
Right.
growling vocals. And I was never really into it because I thought it was not unique. You know, what I liked about the earlier thrash bands is that everyone like all the vocalists had like the distinctive styles, you know.
Hmm.
No one sounded like anybody else, you know. They all had the personality, you
Right.
know. And I wanted the same, you know. I wanted that.
Yeah, and the other thing that I like about the two demos is that you sound like you're just hitting puberty at the time because you probably were. So your voice is still kind of high, and it really matches the I guess it was teenage angst or something at the time, and it really is uh it just sounds more emotional because of that. Just comes through this
Yeah, well,
angry kid sound.
I must have hit puberty a bit earlier because I was already 18 by the time we did the
Oh, okay.
demos,
Yeah, yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see what you're saying, you know. I see what you're saying. It was very high. So I can't do it now. Now I
Right.
can't do it
Well, your
anymore, you
voice
know.
changes over the course of,
It's
decades,
just
40
it's
years
just
ago.
it's just yeah, exactly. It's just the way your body changes, you know, and you
Hmm.
can't do anything about it, you know. I try to do my best, you know, when we play live, but it's just impossible to get that sound exactly like that. I just can't do it anymore.
Hmm.
And yeah, as I said, I mean, there was no technique behind it, no thinking about it, no, oh, I'm gonna do this and that. It's just just wanted to get it out, you know.
Sometimes the best type of expression is one that comes naturally from within. I feel like younger people are better at doing that. And if you look to the past, almost everything was recorded by 16 to 20-year-olds, all the classics. All the classics
Yeah.
that you mentioned were probably all recorded with very young people. And it's surprising to me because I don't think that happens as often these days. I mean, how many groundbreaking record comes out that's recorded by teenagers now?
No,
Probably
not
very
really.
few. Maybe at
Yeah.
least in the
Yeah.
metal scene, it's definitely not that many. Maybe in like
Yeah, yeah.
rap or something, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. For some reason, I mean, maybe the whole extreme metal, whatever. I mean, it wasn't even called extreme metal back then. It was thrash or
Right.
hardcore or death metal or whatever, you know. But it was an expression of that, you know. It was an expression of rebellion and desperation, almost anxiety, you know,
Hmm.
angst, you know. It's I mean, for us, it had to do with our surroundings as well, you know, and we were I won't lie. I mean, we were not oppressed as such, you know, in the
Hmm.
Pinochet regime, but still, you know, there was a very authoritarian vibe all around. The church still had a lot of power, you know. And I clashed with my parents all the time about everything, you know, and all of that sort of seemed to find an expression in this very maybe inarticulate way, but very honest and very true, yeah, very sincere way, you know. And
Hmm.
that's, I think, probably the same thing happened to all these other bands that you mentioned that were in their teens still when they did their first albums. And it's just, I don't know, especially it's funny because I've talked to fellow musicians about this who are also into this era of music, you know. And it's like a lot of the bands, especially European bands, seem to be trying to play beyond their abilities. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Hmm.
The drummers, you know, they knew what they wanted to do,
Right.
but they didn't know how to do
Well, I
it,
think
you
that's
know?
the best that's the best approach to making music, in my opinion. I'm not a musician, but I've heard this
Mhm.
from many bands in the past that if you try to play it beyond your ability, it sounds better because there's a sense of desperation and a little bit of chaos goes into the music.
Absolutely, absolutely. But you don't have that now anymore because now everybody can cheat, you know? You can say, "Oh,
Right.
I want to play the kicks a million miles an hour," and the machine will make it happen for you, you know?
Hmm.
But it's not real, you know? And yeah, and that's why this particular moment in time is probably not going to happen again, you know? That's why it's so special, you know, because it is, yeah, it's just what I said, you know. It's people trying to play beyond their abilities and trying to, and the tempo, you know, was shifting, because guitarists were trying to catch up with the drummer or the other way around or whatever,
Hmm.
and the singer was slightly out of time, but it didn't make sense. I can't say it made sense, but it made a whole that that meant something.
Yeah, and there were probably other limitations, right? Like in terms of technology that was available in
Yeah.
Chile in '87, amount of money you have for the studio, you probably couldn't do too many takes and waste time in there. Um, yeah, things like that. I think having limitation is a good thing in making music. What do you think?
Well, that's one thing that Juan Pablo, my guitarist, once said. Is that the creativity is born out of need, out of precariousness. You don't have the means to do stuff, but you make the best out of it. And it's exactly as you said. I mean, you couldn't get a Marshall amp back then in Chile, or you couldn't get like DiMarzio pickups or whatever, we just had what we had, we tried to figure it out, and the same with the playing, there weren't a million tutorials on YouTube because there was no YouTube, and the drummers, they all they could do was listen to the records and maybe watch some videos, the few videos that were available, and just try to figure out for themselves, and
Hmm.
that was the beauty of it.
Yeah, I mean, what you said about the political environment with Pinochet in power kind of reminds me of what happened in Colombia in Medellin with the drug dealing and the limitations people had there in creating their music. That happened, a couple years after you guys. So
Hmm.
I think Pablo Escobar's reign kind of started around 1988, or maybe started a little bit earlier, but it really reached its peak in '88 in terms of violence and the effects on the government. Were you in touch with any of those bands from Colombia, like Blasphemia, Parabellum?
Not
Uh,
really. No, back then, I mean, I was in touch with some people from Argentina, some people from Peru, and Brazil, of course.
mhm.
I went to Brazil in February of '87.
Yeah.
Um, but no, Colombia, for some reason, I didn't have any contact with back
Okay.
then.
Yeah, they were deep in the underground. Just looking at the old zines, it didn't seem like many people were talking about them, and they didn't like
Mhm.
people didn't discover them until early '90s or late '80s, it seems. It's very interesting how isolated certain scenes are, like
Yeah.
today in this like globalization age, you can listen to anything on YouTube, you can contact anyone, there's Zoom, you can interview anyone. Like if I wanted to, I could interview somebody in Africa right now, it's just unheard of.
Yeah.
It was unheard of all the way into the '90s. Like long distance calls were even expensive back then. I remember racking up $200 because I was talking to a friend in Virginia or something. It was ridiculous. It's
Yeah.
I think kids growing up today just don't understand the limitations that bands had in spreading their information, their music, outside of their local region.
But there's another aspect to what you're saying,
Hmm.
and I always repeat this. Uh, Back then, there was such a thing as a regional sound in the regional scene. Like, you had like the Bay Area thrash
Hmm.
didn't sound like the New York thrash, and the Florida death metal didn't sound like Swedish death metal. And even in Sweden, there was Stockholm and there was Gothenburg who were different,
Hmm.
and all of this, like Brazilian death metal versus Chilean death metal,
Hmm.
they had because they recorded in the same studios, they knew each other, probably used part of the same equipment, even, but like
Right.
borrowing stuff or watching what everybody else was doing, so and all that is gone now. It's out the window. I mean, now you can have a band from Japan sounding like Opeth, or a band from Australia sounding like, I don't know, New York hardcore or whatever, it's this regional aspect of it. It's just not there anymore.
Yeah, yeah, that's a topic that I've discussed with other people in the scene, and I think it all started to happen with globalization in the early 90s when information and just music started to flow a lot easier. And when metal was becoming like death metal and extreme metal was becoming more mainstream,
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
when the regional sounds started to go away. You can really see this with Brazil, 86, 87, 88, all the way up to 1990, bands sounded very Brazilian. Maybe around 93 is when the Brazilian sound just completely went away and just became this generic death metal sound that became very popular there. So I find
Yeah.
that whole situation to be pretty tragic, in my opinion, because yeah, I mean the regional sounds were so unique back then. Like you can go back to I don't know, like New Wave British heavy metal, for example. There's no way to recapture that again.
No,
That
no.
sound is so specific to that region, 78 to 82 or something, whatever the boundaries are for that. That's when most of those recordings were made, and then it's sort of just got phased out over time. Um, but like you said, yeah, I mean, the regional sound was something very special to the underground scene back then. I'm sure the same thing happened in other genres too, right? Like I don't know much about punk and hardcore, but I mean obviously New York hardcore sounds very different from Swedish hardcore. So Anti-Semics and Sick of It All sounds completely different. And I believe that was
Yeah, yeah.
because of the regional and non-global nature of music back then.
And even I mean, yeah, there's one aspect of it is obviously the globalization of communications,
Right.
that anyone can listen to anything, but also the globalization of the technology,
Hmm.
because now you have all these amp simulators and stuff like that, and oh, I want to sound like whatever. I want to sound like the Entombed. Yes, I have this preset, I just have to put it in my little chain and I'm sounding like Ufe, and
Hmm.
it's yeah, it's a little sad, because um there is no struggle behind it anymore,
Hmm.
there's no what can I possibly do with these things that I have in my reach, there's this guitar, there's this amp, or maybe this other amp, this I can choose between these two, but now you can choose between almost an unlimited number of sounds with just a plugin on your computer, So how boring is that? It's like unless you make something really interesting with it, but most bands, and I mean most, 99.999% aren't doing anything interesting with it. They're just
Hmm.
sounding like the next band.
Hmm.
They just want to sound like the most successful bands, And it's just I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's unfortunate. I think the limitations are what gave most of these classic albums character. Like if you take Sarcophagal INRI, for example, the drum sounds like total shit by today's standards. It sounds like a cross between a electronic drum kit and like a toy bucket or something. I don't know. It just sounds so ridiculous, but it's I've listened to it so many times that I've gotten used to it, and I can't imagine listening to that album without the fucked up drum sound.
Yeah.
So I feel like the limitations that bands had really gave character to their sound. It's like you said, it's the desperation of creating something with what they have on hand.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I totally agree.
So staying with Brazil, you went to Brazil in '87 to visit the Sepultura guys back then.
Yeah.
What was that like? Were you in touch with other bands from Brazil at the time besides Sepultura?
Yeah, I'm sure I was in touch with a few of them because I was doing a fanzine back then,
Hmm.
and that's actually how I got to I got in touch with the Cavalera brothers, with Max specifically, because yeah, I sent him an interview. Back then, interview meant like a questionnaire, like written down on in a letter, and he sent me back a tape with his replies, I wish I still have that. Probably I could probably put it out on vinyl and make a fortune or something.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, we stayed in touch, and at some point I just mentioned, I'm because I finished school in December '86, and I just want and I turned 18 like in January '87, and I just wanted to take a trip and be free and be free from
Hmm.
my parents and whatever, so I told him, yeah, I might go to Brazil, and he said, yeah, just come to my house, and it's funny because just recently I heard that Igor told someone that yeah, there's this crazy guy from Chile who used to write to us, but we never really thought he was going to show up because
Yeah.
it was, as you said, it wasn't. I couldn't just send him an email or a WhatsApp. Well,
Right.
I'm going to be there tomorrow. I just showed up. I
That's
just
funny.
rang the doorbell. And they were like, "Fuck! Oh, he's really okay. Come in." And they were living with their mom and their little sister. And in a house which was, I wouldn't say they were poor, but it wasn't. They weren't rich either.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, they invited me in. And yeah, comes I stayed like for a week or something like that. And I went to they were. Yeah, they were just releasing Morbid Visions
That's
at the
crazy.
time,
Yeah.
and there was a TV ad, for
Hmm.
Morbid. If you can believe that, there was a TV ad for Morbid Visions,
Hmm.
and the whole family would gather in front of the TV and just, hey, it's going to come on now. Hey, oh shit, yeah, fuck, man. And so it's all
Hmm.
very, very, very cool, man. I was it some of they were rehearsing in a house that I don't know if it was in ruins or it was just half built or whatever, but it was down from where they lived. You had to walk down a hill or whatever, and it was down there, and they could make noise in there, and they had all this Brazilian gear. That was the other thing, that there was actually a Brazilian industry for musical instruments like
Hmm.
Giannini and all that stuff, and some of it sounded pretty good actually. We had
Hmm.
nothing of that in Chile, and they were writing for Schizophrenia.
Hmm.
But before Andreas Kisser joined, it was still um, fuck, Gyro. Gyro
Right.
was still in the
Tormentor.
band.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, I actually have some photos somewhere, and no, I took some photos and developed them, but then they're probably sitting somewhere in in a box somewhere in my mom's house or somewhere. But that was pretty cool. I went to see them live as well, and it was pretty crazy because there was a lot of just regular metalheads,
Hmm.
but there were some dudes and girls who would show up in like corpse paint and with like huge upside down crosses, and they were banging them on the floor, and it
Wow,
was
that's
like
crazy.
that was like the beginning of black metal for me,
But
because I
it
wasn't
was,
familiar with
yeah. Yeah. I
I
mean, they
wasn't
were way
familiar
ahead of
with
their
that,
time.
because they were wearing like corpse paint and stuff like that, and it was completely new for me, and I was even a little scared. What the fuck are they doing? Because we were like regular dudes, like the torn jeans and the shirts and whatever, the denim jackets and all that. But that was something very new. Yeah. I think they played with Mutilator, and the guy
Yeah.
from Mutilator, I
Oh,
think
yeah, yeah.
so.
Go ahead. Yeah, keep on
And,
going.
and I
Yeah.
think the guy from Mutilator, the singer Silvio, later became became part of the road crew when they started getting big, and they started touring the world and stuff, and they took him with them. Um, and what else? Yeah, I met a bunch of people from Holocausto. I think, if I'm
Did
not mistaken, I went to
maybe you
a
went to
Holocausto.
the release gig because I have the flyer from it. Let me go grab that flyer so I can show you because I feel like that lines up with the gig. Oh, hold on. I'll be right back.
Sure, man. Sure.
it doesn't line up. Sorry. So I guess this is 86, so it might not line up perfectly, but let's see. There's one release party that okay, first of all, was it this venue that you went to? Metal House? Because this is the one that Cogamelo owned, I think, at the time.
I think it was. I think it was, yeah. I'm not
Yeah, here's
100% sure.
okay, this is 86, so maybe it wasn't the year that you went. Um but this one is the release party for Morbid Visions.
Yeah, no, I definitely went in 87. So
Yeah,
yeah,
so it
it
must
can't
have
be
been
that one.
shortly after all this, but
Yeah.
that's still very crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was funny because we had just recorded the first demo, the first Pentagram demo.
Yeah.
And not to blow my own horn, but it sounded pretty good compared to Morbid Visions. Morbid Visions was
Oh yeah,
very
it's raw. Yeah.
rough sounding.
Hmm.
And there was always people coming to their house, to hang out and whatever. And after being there for a couple of days, people came asking for, I mean, I want to listen to that Pentagram demo, that everybody's talking about. And we were listening to it, and I remember even there was this really good-looking girl, and she heard it and said, "Oh, that voice of yours," and it made me totally blush and stuff. But it was funny because once we were listening to this to the stuff, and Max came in. And he didn't realize I was there. He was like, "Yo, already listening to this shit again?" He was kind of jealous. He was,
That's
yeah,
pretty
he was
funny.
kind of, I don't know, insecure about the whole situation. But well, he became famous. I didn't.
Yeah. Well, doesn't matter because the music is eternal. I mean, both Morbid Visions and the Pentagram demos. Yeah. Did you meet Wagner Antichrist from Sarcophago back then, or was that
I, I don't think
after?
I did.
Were
I
they
don't
already
think.
living in Sao Paulo? The Sepultura guys.
No, no, no. They were living in Belo Horizonte.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
I even remember the name of the street, Rua Dores do Indaiá.
Ha. That's etched into your brain.
Absolutely, absolutely. It was crazy, and well, we just hung out. Back then, this guys was still drinking, so we went out drinking, and we obviously we taught each other the swear words from our respective countries, filho da
Mm.
puta and this and that, and I told him the conche tu madre and all this. It was funny. It was just as I said, when teenagers just hanging out, having fun, with no idea, no plan really. I think there was absolutely no plan. I mean, if there was a plan, both for them and for me, it was just to take it as far as we could, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there was no, I mean, we were aware of all the big labels outside, but it seemed so far, so distant, that it 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 seemed impossible that a label like, I don't know, Roadrunner would sign us. It was just we just didn't believe it.
Right.
And it was weird because I posted it a while ago when things kind of started to happen for Pentagram, meaning that we were in a lot of fanzines and stuff, and people started mentioning us a lot, and we were in the tape trading circuit. I even got a letter from Columbia Records
Oh wow.
asking for a demo. Yeah, I got a letter from Columbia Records asking for a demo, and I sent it, obviously, but never heard back from them. But it
Maybe
was
too
weird.
extreme for them back
It
then.
probably, yeah, but maybe I don't know. Maybe they were looking for the next Slayer or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it was crazy times. It was very very fun times, interesting times. But a lot of people. when they ask me about those times, they say like, "Do you miss it?" Do you? I miss, what I miss is the energy. That creativity, that explosive sort of will to do things.
Hmm.
You know, but there were a lot of shitty aspects as well. I mean,
Right.
when we started playing live in bigger venues, we started getting shut down by the police, and we had like a lot of negative press because people said that we were gang members in Chile, and all this stuff, and I always say it seemed like we had everything just against us,
Was that because
everything.
of the Pinochet authoritarian state, or was that just the church, or?
I think it was a mix of things. It was just the mental landscape of the time,
Hmm.
because everyone was like, oh, they're satanic, they're violent, they're this and that. And we just basically, if you think about it, we were just hippies listening to heavier and faster music, but because we weren't hurting anybody,
Right.
and we were doing drugs, but we weren't doing like hard drugs, we were just smoking weed and drinking beer, basically,
Hmm.
hard drugs came along very much later, so it was just, I don't know, we were just kids trying to have fun, trying to express ourselves, and it was seemed so uphill. It seemed so uphill, that eventually we quit, and there was trouble inside the band and everything. Hang on,
Right.
I have to plug in the computer because the battery is
Okay.
dead. Just a sec. It won't take me long. All right.
So
I'm back.
going back to Brazil, there are a couple of points that I wanted to ask about. First of
Sure.
all, how did you communicate? Because can you communicate with a Portuguese speaker in Spanish, or did you just speak English?
No,
Or
it's funny that you asked that because, I mean, Portuguese and Spanish are not that far apart, so
hmm.
you can kind of communicate. But I learned a lot when I went there. And just last year, we went to Brazil and played with Christian, and I still remember a lot of the phrases. Maybe just have a good memory, or I had a good memory. I still remember a lot of phrases, and I could still communicate, and I just learned as I went, really.
Hmm.
So no, we never spoke English. I don't really think the Cavalera brothers spoke in English back then. I mean, look at the lyrics.
Right. Yeah. Oh, they're great.
Yeah, yeah, they are, but they are because they didn't speak English. They
Right.
just put some words together. Like
Hmm.
whatever they read in Bathory lyrics or Venom lyrics or whatever. They just
Yeah.
try to make it sound evil.
Yeah. Yeah. I met Igor last year, and his English was very good.
Oh
So,
yeah, now
uh,
it is obviously. I mean, he's
yeah.
living in London, I think. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, by I don't know, they played in Chile for the first time in '93, I think. And my next band, Criminal, played with them,
Hmm.
and they were already, an international touring band, and they were already speaking pretty good English, so yeah. But back in '87, nah, nothing.
Now, how did you learn English? Because your English is really good, for.
Um, well, I learned the basics in school. I went to a German school in Santiago,
Hmm.
and we had English as a foreign language. But they all, I mean, they teach you the basics, like this is the window and whatever. But it was my interest, I think, in the music that drove me to want to learn more, and I just, I read the lyrics, I read the magazines, the fanzines, and started to figure it out, I don't know.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm just a natural learner, but it wasn't difficult for me, And then, well, after, I mean, I'm 56 years old now. I lived in England for 2 years, I've been to the States a big number of times, so yeah, I mean, it's different now, of course.
Okay. And then lastly, to finish off Brazil, you guys had a deal with the record label from Brazil for a very short amount of time. It just didn't materialize. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I was really stupid, to be honest. I was really stupid because we before we went to Belo Horizonte, where Cogumelo was based,
Hmm.
we went to Rio first. Um, a guy I knew from Chile, his father was living there, so we went to his house first, and he got us like a little apartment to rent, just to stay a few days. And this guy took us to this, how do you call it? I don't even know. It was a typical thing in South America back in the 80s. These buildings that went up like a, I don't know how you call it, like spiral,
Hmm.
and there were shops in there. And there was this one in Rio where all the rock and metal shops were. And there was this particular one called Point Rock. And we went in there. I still remember the guy's breath smelled of coffee because he was drinking coffee, all like this really strong coffee all day. And he had released the Dark Angel album, We Have Arrived, the debut Dark Angel album,
Hmm.
you know? And he also released some punk album, apparently with a license. I don't know if he had a license or not.
Hmm.
But he was like, we played him the demo, and he was like, okay, I want to sign you guys. I want to make an album. And I was like, fuck, man, this this might be my only chance. But I'm still, yeah, we're gonna think about it. And he was like, no, no, no. I mean, it's a one-time offer. You sign now, or the offer's off the table.
Hmm.
And I was stupid. I was naive. I didn't really think things through. So I signed, you know? And then, but there's this other thing. I then went to Belo Horizonte to the Sepultura guys, and Cogumelo was always also a shop. It was like a little
Right.
store
It's still
in
there.
one of these buildings. It's
Hmm.
still there, yeah. I went like a few years ago, but they never took me there. They
No.
never took me there. For some reason, they never took me there, and I have the suspicion that maybe they didn't want me to sign to them as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Something like that. But I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just paranoid or whatever. But yeah, we had this deal with this guy. I was so super happy. Yeah, we have a deal. We're gonna record an album, whatever. But then we, after we got back to Chile, after I got back to Chile, I started communicating this with this guy with like through
Hmm.
letters, handwritten letters. And we started arguing about the budget, and how much are you gonna. And I don't remember the details, but eventually the communication died down, and there was nothing. There was no album. There was just this deal, which in my mind was sort of preventing us from signing with anyone else, even though maybe it was even not legally binding or whatever. It was just some
Hmm.
paper like signed in Brazil.
Right.
But that was around the time. I mean, yeah, I mean, I got back at the end of February '87, and then we did demo two, and then we did all these shows. But in '88, we already disbanded,
Okay.
partly because the album didn't materialize, but there was a lot of other stuff going on. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. It is what it is. It's just the way it happened.
How did the deal with Chainsaw Murder Records come about? Because early Messiah is some of my favorite music, and I always thought the connection was interesting.
It was this guy. I just, well, I started getting many letters when we did the first demo. I
Hmm.
started getting a lot of letters from all over the world. One of them was this guy from Switzerland, Marco, I think it was his name. Dinosaur was his nickname.
Hmm.
And he said that he was working as a roadie with Celtic Frost at the time.
Hmm.
And yeah, he told me, I have this, I just started this label. I put out the Messiah record, and I want to do a 7 inch, with you guys. And I was like, what is there to lose, So we agreed on, I don't know, he was gonna send us like, like all the underground deals nowadays, you just do 100 and send the band 20 or whatever. You do a
Hmm.
thousand, you send the band 200 or 150 or whatever. So that was basically the deal. And he honored this part, he sent us the copies, and you wouldn't believe how difficult it was at the beginning to sell those records, man. I was selling them really cheap for, I don't know what it's now, but it was probably like $5 or something like that, and people wouldn't buy them. I mean,
You should have just kept
that's
them because now they're going for like $100 each. Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
exactly, but um, you never know until you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was basically it. There was not much more to it.
And I believe that 7 inch was critical. In hindsight, it was probably critical in spreading the music because I mean, just Chainsaw Murder records became kind of cult over the years. They didn't do
Mhm.
much, but just having that first Messiah record was put them on the map. I believe the guy also played in Messiah, but I could be wrong. Um, but yeah, I think that spread the music for Pentagram all over Europe. Um, Not just the demos, but that 7 inch got around.
The 7 inch is
That's for
important.
sure.
Yeah, I've met a lot of people over the years, like Worf from Samael, like Sakis from Rotting Christ, like
Hmm.
Thomas from At the Gates, and all of them, they all have their copy of the fucking 7 inch. So it seemed to be like a big deal. But obviously back then, the scene even over there, it was just getting started, so it was still very, very, very underground, but yeah, I mean, it's crazy how I would say that little record inspired a lot of the European bands as well.
Yeah, 7 inch format was pretty big in the punk scene, but not so much in the underground metal scene in the
Hmm.
80s. Like
Hmm.
I can count only a few off the top of my head for extreme metal. Not many extreme metal bands actually did 7 inches in the 80s that I can think of, right? Like
Venom did a bunch at the
yeah, well,
beginning.
of course, yeah, Venom, but they were already on a big label, you know,
Yeah.
and they did a bunch, of course, but in terms of really underground bands, like they skipped the 7 inch stage in the 80s at least. Like it became a bigger thing in the 90s, you know,
Hmm.
with death and black metal bands. It was much easier to manufacture things back then too. Um, in the 90s, 80s was much more difficult for manufacturing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I never really thought about it that way. For us, it was just a great opportunity to get our music heard, and it gets, it was as actually it was like a badge of honor, to
Hmm.
have your music released by European label,
Right. Yeah.
because no other Chilean band did that until much later. Necrosis did an album, but it was with a Brazilian label, and it sounded
Hmm.
like shit as well.
Yeah.
Um, and this one was really well done, it sounded really good and everything. So yeah, and it stood the test of time apparently, because as you said, it's still a very sought after item, So yeah, it was important for us, no doubt, no doubt. And I really like the 7 inch format. I always did. Just sitting there and that's spinning the records, because it just keeps your attention focused on what you're listening
Hmm.
to, You just don't go off doing other things. So, but yeah, obviously it was more of a punk thing, more of a hardcore thing. But I loved having the 7 inch. And it was a big moment for us. I still remember as if it was today, because I had to pick up the records from customs. You know, I maybe had to pay a little bit or something, you know, but they would just deliver it to your house. You had to
Hmm.
go there and fill out a form and whatever, you know. And I went in the metro, you know, in Chile. Back then it was only two metro lines. Now it's like there's like 10 or something like that, you know.
Hmm.
And yeah, and I remember being sitting on the metro on the way back and just looking at the record, just you know, just in awe, you know, oh, we did this, you know, it was crazy, you know, it was great.
How many copies do you know? Did they make like 1,000 or something?
I'm not sure. I think it probably at the beginning it was 500 or something. I don't remember the details. I lost contact with the guy later as well, you know, and I tried to contact him again, but much later.
Hmm.
Never heard from him again. But there's so many people who just dropped out of the scene, you know. So I don't know whatever happened to him. Like the drummer from Destruction is now policeman, you know.
Hmm.
So it's funny. So no, I don't really know, and I know there's been a bunch of bootlegs and stuff, you know, but I don't really care, you know. It's just I have the philosophy you got to be somebody to be bootlegged, you know. If people are
Hmm.
bootlegging you, it's because you mean something, you know.
Yeah. You were in touch with some zines from Japan back then, right? Like FETU. And the reason why I ask is because I'm Japanese.
I think
Uh,
that was later. I think that was later
Was that later? Okay.
when we did the first criminal demos. I think we did the FETU and stuff like that, you know. And the first criminal album was actually released in Japan on Victor or something like a major label because
Hmm.
we weren't on major label in Chile. But
Hmm.
back in Pentagram, I remember I had some kind of, was it a band called Casbah maybe?
Oh, Caspa, yeah. Yeah, Russian roulette. Yeah, that EP is famous. Yeah.
Russian Roulette, exactly.
Yeah.
I still remember it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Them and maybe some other band as well. But fanzines, I don't really remember from back in the day. No,
Did you ever play there with
no,
Criminal or no?
no,
So
no. No.
Pentagram has
I
never played
went.
in Japan.
No, never. I went much later. I went with Lockup.
Okay.
That must have been 2009, 10, 11, maybe. I don't remember exactly. And then later I went again with Brujeria. But no, back in the 80s, 90s, I never went to Japan. No,
Hmm.
would have loved to.
We'll have to fix that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Pentagram over there.
Yes.
So yeah, you later became um not I don't know, I don't want to insult you, but session musician, or did you actually join Brujeria and Lockup?
Yeah, yeah, I'm a member.
Okay.
Yeah, I lock up. Well, you know, Jesse Pintado was the guitarist of that band, and he
Hmm.
passed away. And by that time, I had already moved to Europe,
Right.
and I kept running into Shane Embury, you know, at festivals and stuff, you know. And once they played nearby here, where I am living now, I'm in San Sebastian, Spain. And they played in Biarritz, France, which is just maybe
Hmm.
half an hour away. Um, and he told me, I want you to be the new guitarist in Lockup. And I was like, oh, really? Wow, okay. So I started learning songs and everything. And it took a little while because him and Nick Barker had a bit of a complicated relationship, you know, and they fell out for like a year or something like that. So nothing happened for like a year. And I was like, well, is this ever going to happen? But then it did. It did. And I've actually done three albums with Lockup. So nah, I think I'm more than a session musician.
Okay. What
And
about
Brujeria
Brujeria?
too.
Hmm.
Brujeria, the same thing. I mean, I was called once. Barker was in that band playing drums, and Jeff Walker was doing the bass. And at some point, they had a few shows lined up in Eastern Europe, but somehow they double booked Brujeria and Carcass, so Jeff had to be somewhere else for the last three shows or something like that. So I got this call. I remember I was picking up my daughter from school, and I got this call from Parker asking me if I was up for playing bass in Brujeria for 3 shows or something like that. I went, sure, sure I am. And so I went to get like a secondhand bass and learned the songs. Flew over, did it, and then I think we were rehearsing somewhere for these shows, and Juan Brujo, may rest in peace, asked me, "Well, you're actually a guitarist, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So, how would you feel about doing a US tour with us? And I'm like, "Sure." I was friends with their then guitarist, AK, who then he went on to become Slayer's front of house guy. So he landed on his feet pretty much. So I don't feel bad
Hmm.
about it. But yeah, I did this tour. And back then I was surely a session guy, but after a while, they called me again and again and again, and I just stayed in a band. And at
Hmm.
some point I got my brujeria name as well, El Criminal, that's my stage name. And I mean, I recorded the last album they did with Juan Brujo and Pinche Peach, so yeah, I became a member as well.
So now that both of those bands are gone, what are you doing these days? And besides Pentagram, musically,
Well, Brujeria is still going.
it
We
is okay. I didn't
are,
know that. Okay.
yeah, we decided to carry on because Juan Brujo's son, JC, he was playing the drums when his dad passed,
Hmm.
and I think that's what Brujo would have wanted, his son to inherit the band in a way, and carry on. So we've just been doing European festivals and club shows, and we go into the US actually next week. We're doing a tour with Carcass over there. Then we're doing South America, so we were pretty much active still. I'm not sure what's going to happen in the future. I'm not sure what if it makes sense to put out new music without Juan Brujo and
Hmm.
stuff. We're just playing the hits, right? The hits, but we're just doing that right now, and it's fun. And well, we have bills to pay as well, So I'm gonna be honest about that, and because people say like, "Oh, you only do it for the money," But it left us in a pretty bad position when they died. Peach first, and then 2 months after Juan Brujo died, we're
Hmm.
like, "Well, what now?" This is our day job,
Oh,
So
that's
I
actually
won't lie
surprising.
about
So you
that.
you're not you don't have any other work besides being a musician.
I mean, I have some income here and there, like doing odd things, but not really. Yeah, I mean, between all the stuff that I was doing, I managed
Hmm.
to get by. And the cost of living here in Spain is not that crazy, compared to the States, for example. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's impossible here.
so I manage, yeah, but I don't know what's going to happen now. And I'm as I said before, I'm already 56, so I have no idea what I could do if I didn't do this now.
Hmm.
I'm not going to apply for an office job right now. So
Right.
I'm just getting my feelers out, seeing what's possible, and I'm also getting involved in some stuff with some stuff in back in Chile. I'm co-promoting a festival called Chile Terror Fest, where we're gonna have Mayhem and Triptychon playing Celtic Frost and Sacrifice from Canada, and like a
Hmm.
really old school thing, See what happens with that, could be good, but could be shit as well, So we see about that. But not putting all the eggs in one basket. I'm just hustling. Shane Embury told me we're hustlers, man. That's what we do, You just gotta fucking keep going.
Yeah. What made you move to Europe? Were there not opportunities in Chile for musicians?
Yeah, I mean, My band Criminal had a pretty good run in the 90s in
Hmm.
South America. We played in almost all of South America. We did some pretty big shows, we back then albums were still selling, we sold like 10,000 copies each of our first two albums.
Hmm.
But then at some point at the end of the 90s, I thought I felt that we sort of reached our peak, then there was not much more where to go, and Criminal really never made the jump to the international touring circuit and all that, So I just decided to go, I was married back then, so me and my wife we came here actually first, then we went to the UK. And I wasn't even sure back then if I was gonna keep making music or not, I was totally confused. So I just wanted a new life,
Hmm.
and through a friend, I ended up going to the UK, and I ended up playing in Extreme Noise Terror, believe it or
Oh,
not.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I
That's
toured with
cool.
them a couple times,
Hmm.
and yeah, I kind of kept Criminal going, but on a lower scale, and it wasn't really. Oh, and then I moved to Germany in 2003, and I was working on Metal Blade Records for about 5 years.
Hmm.
And then my daughter was born, and I moved back to Spain. It's all more like personal stuff, it wasn't really career related or music related. But yeah, and that's when at some point I got Shane's message or Shane's call about joining Lockup, and that was kind of a big deal at the beginning. And then Brujeria and so on. So yeah, here I am now.
You're a German descent, so you speak German.
Yes, 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 yes.
So you,
Yeah, my
you
my parents spoke German, my grandparents spoke German, and I went to German school. So yeah.
okay? Yeah, that's interesting. A lot of Germans ended up in South America.
Oh yeah, I know the cliche. I've heard it a million times. But my grandparents weren't war criminals or anything like that. They were
Right.
Nazis,
Hmm.
sure, but they weren't war criminals.
Hmm. So were there like other musicians in Chile that spoke German? Were there a lot of Germans in your area? No.
No, 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 not really. The only guy I know who had like a German last name, but I don't think if he spoke German or not, is Manolo Schaffler from Torturer. You probably
Yeah.
know them,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
the,
did a
the
record.
original the original guitarist
Hmm.
is also of German descent, but I'm not sure if he spoke German or not. And other than that, I mean, there must be. I mean, there's a lot of German people or German of German descent again in Chile, but a lot of them don't speak the language anymore or anything. It's just the last name.
Yeah, there are a lot of Japanese living in South America as well, Brazil and
Mhm.
Peru especially, and most of
Peru,
those,
especially, yeah.
yeah, they don't speak any Japanese. It's pretty interesting. One of the guys from the band Mortem is also Japanese. Yeah.
Yeah, Jose Okamura.
Yes, yes, El
He's my
Chino.
friend. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, he says hello. I was just chatting with him today.
He's a cool guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think we're coming up on a little over an hour, so we can end the session now. Unless you got other stuff, other cool stories to tell.
I don't know. I don't know, man. I think we covered a lot, and yeah, I think we can wrap it up here if that's okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
All
Well, thank
right.
you very much for taking the time to answer my questions, and especially those stories about going down to Brazil are of interest to me and my audience, just because we're obsessed with South American stuff, especially Brazil.
All
So,
right.
just hearing about just the background stories of how these musicians were operating back then, living with their parents. And I can't even imagine like these teenagers that live with their mom and their sister creating morbid visions. Something
Yeah.
that I still listen to this day. It's crazy crazy thing to think about. And then, all of your stories around Pentagram and how much that those two demos mean to me and my fan base, that goes a long way. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
No, thanks, man.
Yeah.
It's been very fun to reminisce, and thanks for everything, and for that killer reissue you did of the demos, man.
Oh yeah,
It
yeah.
really,
We put as much of ourselves into it, and we purposely didn't mess with any of the imagery or anything like that. We wanted to keep it nice and historic, and
yeah,
I think we achieved that. And first
absolutely.
500 copies, as you know, are gone. So we'll press more in the near future and get them down to you in Chile.
All right, man.
Yeah.
Right on.
All right. Thank you very much,
Take care,
and
man.
thanks to everyone for listening. Bye.